Welcome back to Artintensity. During this coronavirus, I've really missed spending time with my grandmother. She is a wonderful woman and I'm really close to her, and so I decided to go paint her from the window. That ended up being a lot more challenging than anticipated due to the weather. I started to draw her and ended up bringing it back home and finishing it off. So here I am, and I am painting a base coat of a yellowish brown color with my Arteza watercolor paints. Once I get a nice neutral tone on there, I'm going to start going and putting the darker tones in and developing some areas to create some depth. When I'm creating shadows for a more warm palette with lots of yellows, I use purple, which is the complementary color to yellow, and I use blues, which is the complementary color to orange, and that makes a nice shadow tone, especially when you mix it with that complementary color. Now, as I always do, I am painting in layers. I am a trained oil painter, so that is kind of where always my go-to. I will lay a color down and let it dry and lay another color down. I will do some mixing of the color on the paper right away and then let that dry and then put another overtone on it just to change the value or the hue slightly. When this whole pandemic started, my grandmother started suffering from a few complications such as a stroke, and so this has been especially hard on her, not being able to spend time with her family. We've been keeping away and only using FaceTime, and I have visited her a few times through the window. The biggest reason I didn't stay and finish painting her through the window was because she couldn't quite grasp why I couldn't come in, and she was getting very discouraged and sad, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Just the look on her face was really upsetting, mostly to her. I mean, it upset me because the last thing on earth I ever want to do, or I never ever want to do, is disappoint my grandmother. I'm blocking in her shirt here with the purple colors. I'm going to start developing more of the picture. I will also be adding more darks and developing the shape of her face. To create the skin tones, I used yellow, more of the greenish colored yellow, not the yellow ochre. But if you're using the Arteza palette, you can kind of see it. It's not a bright yellow, with a very, very watered down reddish rose color. She's a pretty fair woman, but I didn't want her to look stark white. For the shadows, I used more of the brown with a tiny bit of blue mixed in to kind of create a greenish tone, which mixing with the red turned to a nice brown, which is a perfect shadow for a reddish tone. I ended up painting her really small on this paper, and I think it's mainly because she just looks so small and helpless and alone in the big room by herself that's just what I ended up drawing on the paper. I'm slowly developing her facial features and face shape, just a little bit of paint at a time. I wasn't really concerned with most of the areas of this painting, mostly just her face. I'm happy to know that she is being taken care of. Here she is with her coffee, and of course her dog on her lap. The only thing missing is the kitty cat sitting on the top of her chair by her head. I'm building up the tones in the dog, trying to give him a little bit of shape. He does just kind of look like a fuzzy blanket blob on her lap from the window, of course. When you are painting something that you do not want to look like an illustration, you really have to be careful not to do a big dark outline. Sometimes I will give it a little dark outline initially and then blend it out. Anything that you put a big outline on will start to look cartoony, so if you're not going for that look, you want to avoid the big dark outline of any shape. Fingers are very tricky to paint, especially when they're this small. You really just want to kind of suggest the shape of them by using your contrast, the difference between the dark and the light tones. And then it will give that illusion of your fingers, and you don't need to go in there and paint every little detail of your finger. Obviously, I couldn't see every little detail of her finger as I wasn't with her, I was out the window. Alright, so she's sitting in her chair with her legs reclined, so I'm going to create some undulations in the blanket to suggest that her legs are yet indeed under that blanket. I'm using the indigo blue with a little bit of burnt umber mixed in to create a darker tone for that lighter blue that I already have on there. And in between the legs, on the outside of the legs, I put a more darker tone just to make it look like it was wrapped or draped over her legs. I decided to put a more ethereal, loose background in here instead of putting in her living room setting, just because of the whole situation. And again, I was wanting to really just focus on her and not everything around her. For time's sake, I used a heat gun to expedite the drying. If you have a hairdryer or heat gun, you can do that too. Just don't let it blow any wet paint around on your paper unless you're going for that effect. But it definitely helps, especially when you're trying to build up these layers and you don't want to wait half an hour to 45 minutes for it to dry. Again, I'm going to use a little white gel pen just to create some hair strands and to put little eyelids on her and lighten up some areas that I may have made too dark while I was getting that paint on that little tiny area. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you've made it this far. You're still watching me paint. I love you. You are the best. I hope you come back, and please don't forget to like and subscribe at my channel. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.